Scrap metal and shattered bones shared one brutal truth: neither were useless. They just hadn't met the right engineer yet. The writers of Ethelgard believed otherwise. They proved it the moment they dumped the dragon. It hit the hangar floor with a wet, lifeless thud that echoed through the steel skeleton of Bay 42. Oil-stained concrete, scattered tools, half-open engine cores. Everything in the space paused for a fraction of a second, as if even the machines understood something was wrong. Then came the laughter. Not loud. Not joyful. Precise. Designed to cut. Sparrow Abernathy didn't look at the men responsible. Not immediately. He stood with a wrench still in his hand, grease streaked across his forearms, jaw locked so tight it felt like it might crack. He had just spent 6 weeks rebuilding propulsion systems for the same aristocrats now standing in his workspace like they owned the oxygen. Technically, they did. Ethelgard didn't belong to humans. Humans just kept it running. You demanded full compensation, Duke Alistair said, brushing imaginary dust from his pristine riding gloves. His voice carried the effortless cruelty of someone who had never needed to earn anything. The contract specified a dragon of royal lineage. Sparrow finally looked down. The creature wasn't a dragon in any meaningful sense of the word. It was a corpse that hadn't realized it was dead yet. Its scales were wrong, thin, pale, almost translucent, like unfinished material pulled from a mold too early. Its ribs pressed visibly against its skin. Its breathing came in shallow, uneven tremors, each inhale sounding like it had to negotiate permission to exist. And its wings? Sparrow's grip tightened around the wrench. One was gone. Not damaged. Not broken. Gone. Severed halfway down the joint and left to heal into something that looked less like flesh and more like a failed repair job. The other wing dragged uselessly along the ground, its internal structure shattered into pieces that no biological system could ever realign. It didn't even react to the noise. Didn't flinch when one of the riders nudged a loose bolt toward its face. Didn't raise its head when they laughed. She's defective, another noble added casually. Didn't survive proper development. Weak bones. Poor structure. The hatchery marked her for disposal. Disposal. Sparrow exhaled slowly through his nose. And instead, Duke Alistair continued, we honored your request. A dragon of royal blood. The hangar felt smaller, hotter, like the air itself was compressing under something heavy and invisible. This wasn't the deal, Sparrow said. His voice didn't rise. That made it worse. Alistair smiled. Read the wording more carefully next time, mechanic. I rebuilt 6 of your cruisers from scrap, Sparrow said, each word measured. Recalibrated your atmospheric thrusters. Replaced half your failing systems with components you didn't even know existed. And now you've been paid. Sparrow looked back at the dragon. At the way its chest struggled to rise. At the way its eyes, faint, clouded, almost colorless, stared at nothing. At the way it didn't even try to move anymore. You gave me something that's already dead. Alistair's expression didn't change. Then dispose of it, he said lightly. Or keep it as a reminder of your place. The other riders laughed again. They turned their backs before Sparrow could respond, boots echoing cleanly against the metal flooring as they walked toward the exit. The hangar doors hissed open, flooding the interior with harsh daylight from the twin suns outside. For a brief moment, the dragon's body caught that light. And Sparrow saw something he hadn't noticed before. Not movement. Not strength. Not even resistance. Just awareness. The faintest flicker of it. Like something inside the creature hadn't given up yet, but didn't know why it hadn't. The doors slammed shut behind the nobles. Silence filled the hangar. Real silence. The kind that only existed when cruelty left the room and everything else had to process what remained. Sparrow stood there for a long time. Then he walked forward. Slow. Deliberate. Controlled. The dragon made a weak, rasping sound when he got close. Not aggressive. Not defensive. Just tired. As if even fear required more energy than it had left. He crouched beside it. Up close, it was worse. The structural damage wasn't random. It was patterned. Too clean in some places. Too deliberate in others. This wasn't neglect. This was design. His mind shifted. Not emotionally. Mechanically. Wing joint, unsalvageable. Bone density, compromised. Muscle mass, atrophied. Center of gravity, completely unstable. A broken system. A failed machine. Sparrow placed his hand gently against the dragon's snout. The scales were warm. Still alive. They think you're trash, he said quietly. The dragon's eye shifted slightly. Focused. Barely. But it focused. Sparrow looked up at the ceiling of Hangar 42. At the cranes. At the tool racks. At the stacks of composite alloys and neural wiring he'd been saving for something that actually mattered. Then back at the dragon. They think humans just fix things, he continued. His grip tightened. A slow, dangerous smile formed on his face. Let's show them what happens when we upgrade them. Above them, the lights of the hangar flickered once. As if something had just been activated. The first problem was that the dragon should have been dead. The second problem was that Sparrow hated when reality tried to win an argument. He locked Hangar 42 from the inside, killed the external cameras, and ignored the first 3 incoming messages from Duke Alistair's estate. The fourth message came through marked urgent. Sparrow deleted it without reading. The fifth carried a legal threat from the High Rider Council. He muted the entire channel. Then he turned toward the dying dragon on his floor. All right, he muttered, rolling his tool cart closer. Let's see what they did to you. The dragon watched him through one half-open eye. There was no trust there. Trust would have been stupid. Sparrow preferred honest fear. Honest fear meant the creature still wanted to live, even if it had forgotten how to fight for it. He brought out a portable diagnostic frame usually used for cracked shuttle hulls and dragged it around her body. The scanner hummed, throwing pale blue light over her translucent scales.
A holographic model flickered into existence above the workbench. Sparrow stared at it. Then his expression went flat. Oh, you poor thing. The damage was worse than it looked from the outside. The left wing had not been cleanly removed. It had been crushed first, then severed after infection had already started spreading into the joint. The right wing was a disaster of splintered bone, dead membrane, torn ligament, and misaligned growth plates. Several ribs had healed crooked. Her hip structure showed long-term malnutrition. Her lungs were underdeveloped. Her blood chemistry was unstable. But what made Sparrow go quiet was the skeleton. The weakness was too uniform, not natural. No biological defect damaged a body this precisely. He zoomed into the bone density map. Thin red fault lines spread through the wing frame like cracks in cheap ceramic. The degradation pattern was chemical, not genetic. Something had interfered with mineralization during development. Someone had not merely abandoned this dragon. Someone had made sure she would fail before she ever broke shell. Sparrow looked back at her. The dragon's breathing hitched. I know, he said quietly. I'd hate everyone too. He moved carefully after that. Not softly. Softness wasted time. But carefully. He rigged a suspended cargo harness under the overhead crane and lowered padded straps around her body. The dragon hissed when the material touched her ribs, a broken sound with no force behind it. Easy, Sparrow said. You bite me later. Survive first. The crane lifted her slowly. Her ruined wing dragged, and the dragon screamed. Sparrow froze for half a second. Then the engineer took over again. He cut the remaining membrane loose with a sterilized blade, sealed the bleeding with foam cauterant, and moved the body into the clean bay at the rear of the hangar. It was not a hospital. It was a sealed avionics chamber meant for delicate sensor arrays and navigation cores. Tonight, it would become an operating room. He scrubbed the floor twice. Sterilized the tools. Printed surgical clamps from titanium stock. Pulled old xenobiology manuals from a cracked data archive. None of them helped enough. The manuals treated dragons like sacred organisms. Noble beasts. Living symbols. Genetic masterpieces. Symbols were useless on an operating table. Sparrow needed mechanics. He injected her with nutrient solution first. Then antibiotics. Then a sedative he mixed himself from veterinary compounds, engine coolant stabilizer derivatives, and a battlefield anesthetic designed for creatures with redundant organs. It was ugly chemistry, but ugly chemistry had saved plenty of soldiers. The dragon fought the sedative. Weakly at first, then with sudden terror. Her claws scraped the table. Her tail knocked over a tray. Her head snapped toward him, jaws opening around needle teeth. Sparrow didn't pull back. He placed one hand on her snout and held her gaze. "You're not dying on my floor," he said. "Not because they decided you were cheaper as a joke." Her eye fixed on him. For 1 second, something passed between them. Not understanding. Not language. Something simpler. A deal. Then the sedative took her. Her head sank. Her breathing steadied. Sparrow stood over her for a long moment, listening to the twin rhythm of her hearts on the monitor. Only then did he allow himself to feel the anger. It came cold. That was better. Hot anger made men stupid. Cold anger made machines precise. He opened surgical scan again and highlighted both wings. The biological wings were finished. The right one could not be repaired. The left one could not be regrown. Even if he had royal medical equipment, even if he had hatchery specialists, even if the nobles had cared enough to try, this dragon would never fly with flesh again. So Sparrow stopped thinking about flesh. He walked to the far wall of the hangar and pulled the tarp off his private materials rack. Underneath lay the parts he had been hoarding for years. Carbon nanotube struts, graphene smart fabric, military-grade microhydraulics, neuroconductive filament, titanium vertebral mounting plates, a cracked flight processor from a decommissioned atmospheric interceptor. A terrible idea began arranging itself in his head. No, not terrible. Expensive. Dangerous. Probably illegal. Definitely possible. Sparrow looked back at the sleeping dragon. The nobles had given him a broken creature because they believed broken things had only one purpose: humiliation. They had forgotten who they were humiliating. Humans had crossed dead oceans, frozen moons, poisoned worlds, and empty space itself by refusing to accept the original design. A wing was just a lift surface. A nerve was just a signal line. A spine was just a mounting frame with opinions. Sparrow pulled up a blank design grid. The hologram expanded above the table, surrounding the dragon's ruined body with lines of blue light. He built the first model in silence. Then the second. Then the third. By dawn, the hangar floor was covered in discarded calculations, empty caffeine tubes, and the first complete blueprint of something no rider on a Thalgard had ever imagined. Not a repaired dragon. Not a replacement mount. A living aerospace platform. Sparrow stared at the final projection. A pale, broken dragon carrying two enormous black mechanical wings folded against a reinforced spine. For the first time that night, he smiled. "All right, girl," he said, voice raw from exhaustion. They wanted a tragedy. He reached for the laser cutter. "Let's build them a nightmare." The surgery took 72 hours. Not because Sparrow was slow. Because there were too many ways to kill her by accident. A dragon was not a shuttle. A shuttle did not bleed when you removed dead weight. A shuttle did not scream through sedatives when a buried nerve bundle fired one last warning into a ruined limb. A shuttle did not have two hearts that argued with each other whenever the anesthesia dipped below safe levels. By the 9th hour, Sparrow stopped pretending this was repair work. It was resurrection. He cut away the shattered right wing first. The membrane came apart in strips, gray at the edges where tissue death had already won. Beneath it, the bone structure was worse than the scan suggested. Hollow support bones had collapsed inward like crushed tubing. Some pieces had fused wrong. Others had never fully formed. The entire wing looked less like an injury and more like sabotage disguised as birth. Sparrow worked without music. No distractions. Just the pulse monitor, the hiss of sterile air, and the low electric whine of the laser cutter as it traced through flesh that would never carry her again. "I know," he muttered when her body twitched. "I know. I'm sorry." The apology was useless. He said it anyway. When the dead wing finally came free, he carried it to the disposal tray himself. It weighed less than it should have. Too light. Too brittle. A sacred royal dragon wing, according to the nobles. A miracle of bloodline and breeding. It cracked when he set it down. Sparrow stared at it for 3 seconds. Then he turned back to the table. The left stump was cleaner, but crueler. Someone had cut it after the crush injury, then allowed it to scar over badly. There was surviving muscle beneath the healed tissue. Atrophied.
Weak.
But alive. The nerve bundle at the base still responded to stimulation. That mattered. That was the line between a puppet and a body. Sparrow spent 6 hours isolating those nerves. He placed silver-thin neuroconductive filaments into the surviving tissue one at a time, each filament thinner than a hair, each one designed to carry intention from biology into machinery. His hands cramped twice. His vision blurred. He drank cold coffee from a container with metal shavings stuck to the outside and kept working. By the 24th hour, the dragon had stopped looking like a creature and started looking like a battlefield. Open anchor points along the spine. Exposed muscle packed in regenerative gel. Titanium brackets laid out beside clamps and blood-stained tools. A holographic overlay mapped every future load-bearing point across her body. The wings could not simply attach to the shoulders. That would tear her apart on the first downstroke. The force had to distribute through the spine, ribs, hips, and chest, turning her entire frame into a flight chassis. The nobles bred dragons like symbols. Sparrow rebuilt this one like an aircraft. He milled the spinal harness from titanium carbon composite, shaving every unnecessary gram without compromising tensile strength. The central rail curved along her back like a black mechanical vertebra. Secondary braces locked around her rib cage. Shock absorbers rested near the hips to manage landing impact. Each piece had to fit a body no manufacturer had measured, no military had modeled, and no sane engineer would agree to test. Sparrow test-fit the harness at hour 31. It was wrong. Too much pressure near the second thoracic ridge. Too little support across the left shoulder mass. A downstroke at full force would fracture the upper spine. He tore the design apart and started over. At hour 39, the second harness fit. At hour 42, he drilled into bone. That was the moment his hands almost failed him. The dragon lay unconscious beneath surgical lights, small under all the machinery. Pale scales washed nearly transparent. Sparrow held the precision drill over the first reinforced vertebral plate and felt, for one dangerous second, the full insanity of what he was doing. One mistake, and she would never walk. One wrong angle, and the harness would become a torture device. One bad calculation, and the first flight would rip her open. He closed his eyes. Then he remembered Duke Alistair's smile. Dispose of it. Sparrow opened his eyes and drilled. The first screw seated clean. Then the second. Then the third. By the time the full spinal chassis locked into place, sweat had soaked through his shirt and dried cold against his back. The dragon's monitors still pulsed. Both hearts alive. Blood pressure low but stable. Nerve response weak but present. Good girl, Sparrow whispered. Stay with me. The wings took shape on the fabrication floor while she slept. They were ugly at first. Bare titanium bones stretched across support racks, jointed like predatory machinery. Sparrow modeled the folding pattern after old carrier aircraft and hunting birds, then adjusted it for dragon physiology. Biological dragons used flex, instinct, membrane tension, and muscle fatigue. Valkyrie would use hydraulics, smart fabric, gyroscopic correction, and software that learned faster than pain. He had not meant to name her yet. The name came while he was cutting the first graphene membrane. Valkyrie. A heavy name. A warrior name. A name that belonged to something carried from death into battle. He looked toward the operating table. Hope you don't mind, he said. You looked like you needed a better title than defect. By hour 53, the wings were assembled. Matte black titanium struts. Graphene's smart fabric stretched between them like dark skin. Micro-hydraulic bundles nested at every joint. Sensor filaments woven along the leading edges to simulate pressure feedback. A central flight processor mounted beneath the spinal armor, crude but powerful enough to translate instinct into movement. The hardest part came last. The link. Sparrow connected the surviving nerve bundles to the processor and watched the first signal crawl across the diagnostic screen.
Static.
Then noise. Then a pattern.
Weak.
Fragmented.
Alive.
He laughed once, exhausted and almost angry with relief. There you are. At dawn of the fourth day, Hangar 42 was silent except for the low hum of active systems. Sparrow stood beside the operating table, hollow-eyed, unshaven, hands wrapped in fresh bandages where tools had torn through his skin. Before him lay the dragon the nobles had thrown away. Except she was not that dragon anymore. Her white body was still thin, still scarred, still fragile, in places time would have to strengthen. But along her spine ran a black armored chassis. From her shoulders folded two massive mechanical wings, dark and sharp and terrifying, like pieces of night bolted onto a ghost. She looked wrong. She looked impossible. She looked alive. Sparrow reached for the control panel and began reversing the sedative flow. The monitors shifted. One heart accelerated. Then the other. A claw flexed against the table. The dragon's eyes opened. Pale pink. Panicked. Burning. Sparrow stepped into her line of sight with both hands raised. Easy, Valkyrie, he said, voice rough. Don't fight the machine. Her body jerked. Her shoulder muscles fired. The neural processor caught the signal. For the first time, the black wings answered. They snapped open with a thunderous metallic crack, blasting surgical trays off the table and throwing dust across the clean bay in a violent wave. Valkyrie froze. Sparrow stared up at the 40-foot span of titanium and graphene filling the room. Then the dragon turned her head slowly and saw what had become part of her. A low sound rose from her chest. Not pain. Not fear. Wonder. Sparrow smiled through 3 days of exhaustion. Yeah, he whispered. You're still here. The first time Valkyrie tried to stand, she failed. Not gracefully. Not quietly. Her forelegs pushed against the reinforced table, muscles firing with desperate urgency, and for one unstable second it looked like her body remembered what to do. Then the weight shifted wrong. The spinal chassis compensated too late. Her rear legs slipped, and the entire structure collapsed sideways with a violent metallic crash that rattled every tool rack in Hangar 42. Sparrow didn't move to catch her. He moved to clear the space. Good, he said immediately, voice steady despite the impact. That's good. You're trying. Valkyrie didn't hear the words. Or if she did, they meant nothing yet. Her breathing spiked. Both hearts hammered. Her body trembled with confusion, pain, and something deeper, something closer to panic than instinct. The wings reacted before she understood why. One of the mechanical joints overcorrected, firing a partial stabilizing motion that dragged the right wing hard against the floor. Graphene membranes scraped metal. The hydraulic system whined under uneven load. Valkyrie froze. Her eyes locked onto the wing. The wrong wing. The impossible wing. It moved again, slightly this time, responding to a signal she hadn't consciously sent. That's when the fear hit. She jerked backward, claws scraping, trying to pull away from the thing attached to her spine. The wings followed. Not aggressively. Not independently. But inevitably. Sparrow stepped forward. Not close enough to corner her. Close enough to be seen.
Stop, he said.
Not loud. Not commanding.
Clear.
Valkyrie's head snapped toward him. Her pupils flared wide, pink irises almost lost in the dilation. Her chest rose too fast, too shallow. She didn't understand the room. She didn't understand the body. She didn't understand the machine. But she understood him. The same way she had during the sedation. Not as safety. Not yet. But as something consistent in a world that had suddenly stopped making sense. You're fine, Sparrow said, slower now. Nothing's attacking you. The wings twitched. A ripple passed through the neural interface. Sparrow saw it on the diagnostic panel before he saw it in motion. Signal loop instability. She wasn't controlling the wings. She was reacting to them reacting to her. Feedback spiral. He moved to the control console and cut the autonomous stabilization by 30%. The wings went still. Not dead. Waiting. Valkyrie blinked. Her breathing slowed by a fraction. Sparrow turned back toward her. Those are yours, he said, nodding toward the wings. She followed his gaze. Slowly, like the concept itself weighed something. They don't move unless you do, he continued. They're not separate. They're not hunting you. They're listening. The dragon didn't respond. Not outwardly. But her eyes didn't leave the wings. Sparrow stepped closer.
Carefully.
Measured. Every movement deliberate. He crouched just outside striking range, not because he thought she would attack, but because instincts didn't ask permission before acting. Try something small, he said. Nothing. Just a thought. Her tail shifted. The wings didn't.
Good.
Signal isolation holding. Not that, Sparrow muttered. Focus forward. He tapped his own shoulder. Think about moving this. Valkyrie's gaze flicked between his hand and her own body. Confusion. Hesitation. Then,
A twitch.
so small it would have been invisible without the sensors. But Sparrow saw it. More importantly, the wings responded correctly. A slight adjustment. No overcorrection. No feedback loop. Clean signal. Sparrow smiled. There it is. Valkyrie stilled again. This time, not from fear. From focus. Her entire body went quiet, like something inside her had shifted from panic into observation. She tried again. Another twitch. Stronger. The left wing unfolded halfway. Slow. Controlled. Deliberate. The hydraulics hummed softly, not screaming like before. Valkyrie froze. Not because it scared her. Because it obeyed her. That was new. That was impossible. That was hers. Sparrow didn't interrupt. Didn't rush. Didn't explain. He let the moment build. Because this was the real surgery. Not the one with tools. The one where a broken creature realized it wasn't broken anymore. Valkyrie moved again. This time she meant it. Her forelegs pressed against the ground. Her body shifted. The spinal chassis engaged. Load distributed across reinforced plates. Shock absorbers compensated. And slowly, she stood. Not steady. Not strong. But standing. The wings extended instinctively to balance. Perfectly this time. No feedback loop. No panic. Just motion. Sparrow let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Yeah, he said quietly. That's how it starts. Valkyrie turned her head toward him. For the first time since waking, there was no fear in her eyes. Only confusion, curiosity, and something else. Something Sparrow recognized immediately. Ownership. She looked back at the wings. Then flexed them. Fully. The mechanical span filled the hangar like a shadow breaking free from gravity itself. The sound wasn't violent anymore. It was controlled. Heavy. Powerful. Valkyrie held them there for a moment, then folded them back in.
Clean. Precise.
Her movement. Her control.
Her body.
Sparrow leaned back slightly, studying her. 3 days ago, she had been a discarded failure. Now she was standing in his hangar with a flight system no rider in a Thalgard had ever seen. Not healed. Not restored. Something else. Valkyrie shifted her weight again. Testing. Learning. Adapting.
Fast.
Too fast for something that had supposedly been born defective. Sparrow's eyes narrowed slightly. Yeah, he murmured. You were never weak, were you? Valkyrie looked at him. This time, the connection held longer. Not confusion. Not fear. Recognition. The kind that doesn't need language. The kind that says, you did this. Sparrow gave a small nod.
Yeah, he said.
I did. The lights of Hangar 42 flickered once as the power grid adjusted to the increased load. Neither of them noticed, because for the first time since she had been thrown onto that floor, the dragon the nobles called broken had taken her first step forward. And nothing about it looked weak. Learning to stand was not the same as learning to fly. Valkyrie discovered that violently. Sparrow cleared the central hangar floor, moved 2 engine blocks, chained the overhead cranes into a support grid, and built a suspension harness from cargo straps rated for armored vehicles. It looked ugly, improvised, and absolutely unsafe by any inspection standard, which meant it would probably work. Valkyrie stood beneath the hanging rig, her pale body tense, mechanical wings folded tight against her sides. The black titanium made her look larger than she was. More dangerous. But Sparrow could see the truth in the small details, the slight tremor in her rear legs, the guarded tilt of her head, the way her claws gripped the concrete, like the floor might betray her. "You're not falling today," Sparrow said, tightening the last strap. "Not far, anyway." Valkyrie gave him a low rumble. It was not trust. Not fully. But it was no longer fear. That was enough. He climbed onto a scissor lift with a data pad in one hand and a manual emergency cutoff in the other. The harness lifted Valkyrie 2 meters off the floor. Her legs tucked awkwardly beneath her. Her wings shifted in discomfort, microhydraulics whispering as the processor tried to interpret body signals without ground contact. "All right," Sparrow said. "Small extension. Left wing only." Valkyrie stared at him. Then her left wing snapped open with enough force to swing her entire body sideways. The harness caught her. The ceiling crane groaned. A toolbox exploded across the floor. Sparrow lowered the data pad slowly. Too much left wing. Valkyrie made a sharp, embarrassed sound and folded the wing back in. They tried again. And again. And again. By the 10th attempt, Sparrow had reduced the neural gain by 40% and added a delay buffer to prevent instinctive overcorrection. By the 20th, Valkyrie could extend one wing halfway without nearly destroying the hanger. By the 30th, she could move both wings together in a slow, controlled downstroke. It was ugly. It was uneven. It was progress. For 3 weeks, Hangar 42 became less a workshop and more a war between gravity and stubbornness. Sparrow slept on a rolling creeper beneath the diagnostic station because walking to his bunk wasted time. Valkyrie slept near the warm generator banks, curled carefully around her wings like she was still afraid they might vanish if she stopped paying attention. Every morning began with calibration. Every afternoon ended with failure. Every night, Sparrow rewrote the software while Valkyrie watched him through half-lidded pink eyes. The bond did not form in some magical moment. It formed in repetition. In Sparrow tightening a loose bolt before it became pain. In Valkyrie lowering her head so he could check the spinal mount. In him learning the difference between her angry rumble and her frustrated one. In her learning that when he said, "Hold still," it meant the burn would stop faster. Once, after a failed downstroke sent her crashing hard into the padded wall, Valkyrie refused to move for nearly an hour. She lay there with her head against the floor, mechanical wings half open, breathing in shallow waves. Sparrow sat beside her. He did not touch her. He did not coax. He simply opened a ration pack, took one bite, grimaced, and set the rest near her snout. "Terrible," he said. "You'll like it." Valkyrie stared at the ration. Then at him. Then she ate it. After that, she got back up. That was the first time Sparrow realized she was not only intelligent. She was proud. Not noble proud. Not bloodline proud. Not the polished arrogance of writers who inherited power and mistook ownership for mastery. Valkyrie's pride was raw. Harsher. The pride of something that had been denied a future and had decided to drag one out of the universe anyway. By the end of the second week, she could walk with the wings folded. By the middle of the third, she could flare them for balance. By the final night, she crossed the entire hangar floor without stumbling once. Sparrow stood near the main doors, arms folded, grease on his cheek, exhaustion carved deep under his eyes. Valkyrie stopped before him. Then, deliberately, she unfolded both wings. Not fast. Not violently. Fully. The black span filled the hangar, every joint aligned, every membrane pulled tight, every hydraulic bundle humming in smooth coordination. Sparrow checked the telemetry. Load balance stable. Neural sync stable. Hydraulic pressure stable. Structural stress below tolerance. He swallowed. "Well," he said quietly, "that ruins my excuse for delaying the hard part." Valkyrie tilted her head. Sparrow looked up toward the sealed roof doors of Hangar 42. Beyond them waited the sky. The same sky she had been born for. The same sky the nobles had decided she would never touch. He should have waited another month. A responsible engineer would have run more simulations. A careful pilot would have tested glide control in a wind tunnel. A sane man would have reported the experimental cyborg dragon to someone with insurance. Sparrow was tired of sane men deciding what broken things were allowed to become. He walked to the rear storage rack and pulled down an old flight harness from a wrecked military skimmer. The straps were worn. The buckles were dented. The seat had a burn mark across the left side. It would hold.
Probably.
Valkyrie watched him bolt the harness onto the spinal chassis. Her wings flexed once. Nervous.
Eager. Both.
Sparrow climbed onto her back for the first time. She went completely still. Not because of fear. Because she understood the weight of the moment. A rider had never chosen her. A rider had never trusted her. A rider had never looked at her and seen the sky instead of the defect. Sparrow secured the final strap across his chest and leaned forward, resting one gloved hand against the warm, white scales of her neck. No bloodline saddle, he said. No noble permission. No royal ceremony. The roof doors began to open above them. Cold morning air poured into the hangar. Valkyrie lifted her head. Her mechanical wings unfolded into the dawn. Sparrow smiled beneath his helmet. Just you, me, and a very expensive bad idea. The first sunlight touched her black wings. And for the first time in her life, Valkyrie looked up at the sky like it belonged to her. The launch was a mistake. Sparrow knew that 3 seconds after Valkyrie left the hangar floor. Not because she failed. Because she succeeded too hard. Her hind legs compressed beneath her like loaded industrial springs. The titanium wings came down once, and the entire hangar answered with violence. Loose panels ripped from the walls. Dust exploded outward. A stack of empty fuel drums tumbled across the floor like toys. Then Valkyrie went up. Straight up. No graceful running start. No noble dragon leap. No elegant climb into the wind. She punched the sky. Sparrow's back slammed into the harness seat. His lungs compressed. The readouts on his visor spiked red so fast they blurred. The roof doors vanished beneath them, and Hangar 42 became a shrinking square of steel surrounded by the industrial sprawl of a Thalgard. Throttle down, Sparrow shouted. Valkyrie did not understand throttle. She understood freedom. And freedom, apparently, meant maximum hydraulic output. The first wingbeat launched them through a cloud layer. The second nearly tore Sparrow's soul out through his boots. The third sent them into the upper winds above the city, where the twin suns burned gold against a purple horizon and the air thinned enough to make every breath feel stolen. Then Valkyrie hesitated. For one terrible second, the sky went quiet. Her body hung at the top of the climb, wings extended, white scales shining, black metal stretched against morning light. Sparrow felt the shift immediately. Lift collapsed. The left wing dipped. The horizon tilted. They began to fall. Okay, he said, forcing calm into his voice. That part was expected. It had not been expected. The altimeter screamed. Wind hammered against his helmet. Valkyrie's breathing spiked through the biomonitor. Her neural signals scattered across the display in jagged bursts of panic. She had the wings. She had the strength. She had the sky. But her body remembered falling. Not flying. Sparrow grabbed the manual override stick.
No.
He stopped himself. If he took control now, she would never truly learn the wings were hers. Valkyrie, he said, voice sharp enough to cut through the alarms. Listen to me. The dragon twisted in freefall, wings flaring unevenly. Below them, the city rushed upward. Industrial towers. Smoke vents. Cargo rails. The hard, ugly geometry of a world that had thrown her away. Don't fight the fall, Sparrow said. Use it. Her head turned slightly. Not enough. Feel the pressure on the wing edge.
There.
Right side. Catch it. The right wing trembled. The processor translated the instinct. The graphene membrane tightened. A pocket of air struck beneath them. Valkyrie jerked violently upward, not flying yet, but no longer simply falling. Yes, Sparrow breathed. Again. The left wing adjusted. Too wide. They rolled hard. Sparrow's stomach tried to exit through his ribs. Smaller correction. Smaller. Valkyrie screamed, half terror, half fury, and snapped both wings into alignment. The fall became a glide. Not smooth. Not stable. But controlled. The city stopped rushing toward them and began sliding beneath them. For 3 seconds, neither of them made a sound. Then Valkyrie beat her wings.
Once.
The air caught.
Twice.
The glide lifted. 3rd time. She flew. Sparrow laughed. It came out raw, disbelieving, almost broken. "You're doing it," he said. "You're actually doing it." Valkyrie answered with a roar that shook through her spine and into his chest. It was not the weak rasp from the hangar floor. It was not pain.
It was not fear.
It was claim. She banked left, clumsy but powerful, cutting across the upper windstream above Athalgard's industrial district. Her mechanical wings did not flex like natural wings. They locked, snapped, corrected, and drove her through the air with brutal mathematical certainty. Every movement was too sharp. Every correction too strong. Every beat too loud. She was not graceful. She was better. Sparrow watched the telemetry scroll across his visor. Drag coefficient lower than predicted. Lift generation stable. Neural sync improving in real time. Hydraulic temperature climbing but within tolerance. Structural stress acceptable. He stared at the numbers, then at the sky ahead. A normal dragon could fly. Valkyrie could accelerate. "Let's see what they stole from you," he said. He angled his weight forward and tapped the side of her neck. "Climb." Valkyrie climbed. This time, not in panic. With intention. The city dropped beneath them. The towers became needles. The noble estates on the upper cliffs flashed white and gold in the distance, clean and untouched above the smoke of the workers' districts. Farther beyond, the obsidian mountains clawed at the horizon. At 20,000 feet, Valkyrie leveled out. Her breathing was steady now. Her wings held firm. Sparrow checked the oxygen enrichment field and grinned despite himself. "Still alive," he muttered. "Good design choice." Then he pointed her nose down. "Dive." Valkyrie understood that word before he explained it. Her wings tucked. Gravity took them. The world became speed. Wind screamed over the graphene membrane. The leading edges heated under atmospheric friction. Sparrow's visor darkened automatically as vibration roared through the frame. Numbers climbed. 100 knots. 200. 300. A normal dragon would have begun tearing muscle by now. Valkyrie cut through the sky, like a blade dropped from orbit. "Pull up at my mark," Sparrow said, though his voice had gone thin. The ground expanded. Forests became individual trees. Rivers became silver scars. The altimeter shrieked.
"Now."
Valkyrie flared her wings. The deceleration hit like a collision with an invisible wall. Sparrow's vision tunneled black at the edges. The wing strut screamed. The spinal chassis absorbed the force and distributed it through her reinforced body exactly as designed. Exactly. The hardware held. They leveled out above the treetops, so low the shockwave tore leaves from branches. Behind them, the delayed crack of displaced air rolled across the valley like thunder. Valkyrie roared again. This time, joy lived inside it. Sparrow leaned forward against the harness, breathing hard, laughing harder. "You're the fastest thing in this sky," he said. For one perfect moment, the world had no nobles in it. No contracts. No cruelty. No word like defect. Only wind, sunlight, and a broken dragon proving gravity had underestimated her. Then the radar alarm flashed red. Sparrow's laughter died. Multiple contacts.
Fast.
Converging on Hangar 42. His jaw tightened as the display painted armed signatures circling his property. Not inspectors. Not guards. Military riders. The High Council had come to erase its mistake. Sparrow looked toward the city, then down at Valkyrie's black wings, still glowing faintly from the dive. "All right, girl," he said, voice turning cold. "Test flight is over." Valkyrie banked hard toward home. Now we find out if they're afraid of what they made. Hangar 42 was already surrounded when Sparrow returned. From above, the scene looked surgical. 4 armored transports hovered around the property in a diamond formation, engines churning dust across the industrial yard. Ground troops sealed the access roads. Watch drones circled the roof vents. Above them all, 6 royal dragons carved slow, predatory loops through the sky, their scales flashing ruby, emerald, and midnight blue beneath the twin suns. The Vanguard, Athalgard's untouchable aerial elite. Perfect dragons. Perfect riders. Perfect arrogance. Sparrow kept Valkyrie inside the edge of a low cloud bank and watched through magnified optics. They brought ceremony, he muttered. Valkyrie's chest vibrated beneath him. She knew those dragons. Not their names. Not their riders. Something older than names.
Scent. Shape. Memory.
Hatchery shadows. Larger bodies shoving her aside.
Heat. Pain.
The cold floor where no one came when she cried.
Her wings flexed.
Easy, Sparrow said. Not yet. Below, the lead transport opened. Chief Inspector Artha stepped onto the concrete with 2 armed officers and enough confidence to prove he had never been hit with a wrench. He carried a legal scroll in one hand and a shock pistol in the other. Sparrow opened a private channel into the hangar speakers. Artha. The inspector stopped. His head snapped upward. Abernathy, he barked. By order of the High Rider Council, surrender the defective dragon for immediate euthanasia. You are charged with illegal modification of royal bloodstock, obstruction of genetic law, and theft of biological property. Sparrow stared at the men around his hangar. His shop. His tools. The only place on this planet that had ever belonged to him. You gave her to me. Artha's mouth twisted. A clerical correction has been issued. That's a fancy way to say you regret throwing away something valuable. She is not valuable. She is contaminated. Valkyrie growled. The sound rolled through the cloud around them like a buried engine waking. One of the royal dragons below lifted its head. Sparrow cut the external speaker and leaned close to Valkyrie's neck. They're not here because you're weak, he said. They're here because you stood up. Then he dropped from the clouds. Valkyrie fell like judgment. The Vanguard riders saw her too late. 1 second, the sky above Hangar 42 held only drifting vapor. The next, a ghost-white dragon with black mechanical wings slammed into view, sunlight flashing across titanium edges as she opened her full span over the yard. Every weapon below froze. Even the dragons stopped moving. For the first time in their lives, the perfect royal mounts looked uncertain. Valkyrie landed on the hangar roof with a metallic impact that buckled the outer plating. Her wings spread wide, casting a dark shadow across Artha, the troops, and the polished transports. Her pale scales shone like bone. Her black wings hummed with restrained hydraulic force. Sparrow unlatched his helmet visor. Inspection's over. Artha stared upward, face drained of color. What have you done? I fixed her. That thing is an abomination. No, Sparrow said. That thing is evidence. Artha's eyes narrowed. For half a second, the inspector's mask slipped.
Fear.
Not of Valkyrie's claws. Not of her wings. Of the word evidence. Sparrow noticed. And suddenly the earlier scans made more sense. The chemical degradation. The uniform bone weakness. The impossible precision of her damage. He looked down at Artha. You knew, Sparrow said. The inspector recovered too quickly. Vanguard, seize the creature. The nearest royal rider gave the command. 2 emerald dragons surged upward, jaws opening, throats glowing with blue fire. Valkyrie did not wait. She launched backward off the roof, wings folding tight, dropping between the 2 attacks as plasma burned empty air above her. Sparrow's harness locked hard across his chest. He watched the telemetry spike, then shoved power into the left stabilizer. Roll. Valkyrie rolled. Not like a dragon, like an aircraft with teeth. She twisted beneath the first emerald mount, snapped her right wing open, and struck its chest with a reinforced leading edge. The impact sounded like a bell made of bone. The royal dragon shrieked and spun sideways, its rider barely staying mounted. The second came from above. Valkyrie fired straight upward, not fleeing but meeting it head-on. Sparrow saw the rider's eyes widen behind his polished visor as he realized too late that mechanical wings did not tire, and titanium did not fear collision. Break left. Valkyrie obeyed. The emerald dragon overshot. Valkyrie's tail lashed across its saddle, cracking the rider's harness mount and sending him tumbling against his own beast's neck. Below, Arthas screamed orders. The remaining vanguard spread out.
Now, it was a fight.
Sparrow had no weapons. Not real ones. No cannons. No missiles. No fire. Only speed, mass, nerve, and the fact that Athalgard's finest riders had spent their lives training against biology. Valkyrie was no longer limited to biology. A ruby dragon lunged from the right with a cone of flame. Valkyrie folded one wing completely, air-braked with the other, and dropped beneath the blast in a maneuver that would have snapped organic joints apart. Sparrow's vision blurred under the force. The ruby rider tried to turn after them, but his mount was too heavy, too slow, too natural. Valkyrie came up behind him. One strike from her left wing shattered the dragon's rear saddle brace. The rider panicked and pulled away. 3 disabled, Sparrow counted. No kills. Valkyrie growled, disappointed. Don't argue. We're making a point. Then the sky heated. A massive crimson dragon descended through the upper clouds, larger than the others, its scales dark red and glowing at the throat. On its back sat Duke Alistair, immaculate even in combat armor. Of course he had come personally. Men like him always wanted to witness cruelty when they thought it was safe. His voice broke across the open channel. Enough, mechanic. You have damaged royal property, assaulted lawful riders, and defiled a sacred beast. Land now, and I may allow your death to be quick. Sparrow looked at the Crimson Dragon, then at Valkyrie's stress readouts. Right wing actuator, hot. Spinal load, high. Neural sync, unstable but improving. Not enough for a full battle. Not yet. He opened the channel. You threw her away. She was defective. No, Sparrow said, voice low. She was sabotaged. Silence. Too much silence. Alistair's response came colder. You should not have looked that closely. There it was. The truth. Ugly and alive. Sparrow felt something inside him lock into place. You poisoned her. We preserve order. You cripple babies. We maintain bloodline stability. Valkyrie heard enough. Her roar tore across the sky, mechanical and organic at once, so violent the transports below rocked in their own engine wash. Alistair raised one armored hand. Burn them. The Crimson Dragon's throat ignited white. Sparrow saw the plasma build, and knew instantly they could not dodge. Too wide. Too close. Too much heat. Wings forward, he shouted. Valkyrie snapped both black wings around them like a shield. The plasma hit. The world became fire. Fire wrapped around them like the sky had turned into a furnace. For 3 seconds, Sparrow could not see anything except white. The plasma blast hammered against Valkyrie's folded wings, screaming across the graphene membrane and boiling the air around them. Heat alarms detonated inside his helmet. External temperature readings went past safe, past dangerous, past anything the interface had polite colors for. Valkyrie roared inside the metal cocoon. Not from fear.
Pain.
The thermal coating held, but holding was not the same as surviving comfortably. Her surface sensors overloaded. Hydraulic fluid temperature spiked. The right wing's leading edge glowed red beneath the blast, and the smell of scorched composite filled Sparrow's helmet filters. Hold, he shouted. Hold. Below them, the vanguard riders hovered in formation, watching the impossible creature burn. Duke Alistair's voice came through the channel, smooth and satisfied. Even metal melts, mechanic. Sparrow's eyes flicked across the diagnostics. Left membrane integrity, 89%. Right membrane, 73%. Spinal chassis, stable. Hydraulics, overheated but responsive. Neural sync, rising. Rising? Sparrow stared. Valkyrie was not shutting down. She was focusing. Inside the fire, with plasma beating against her wings and pain screaming through every sensor line, the dragon's neural output sharpened into a clean, violent pattern. Not panic. Intent. Sparrow smiled like a man who had just discovered the bomb under his chair was wired to the enemy. All right, he whispered. Your turn. The plasma stream faltered as the crimson dragon inhaled. Open. Valkyrie snapped her wings outward. The movement displaced a wall of superheated air in a single concussive burst. The shockwave hit the crimson dragon head-on, staggering the beast backward through the smoke. Its rider lurched in the saddle. Sparrow shoved the control stick forward. Dive. Valkyrie dropped under the vanguard formation like a blade falling through water. Alistair recovered fast. Too fast. Pursue. The sky erupted behind them. 6 dragons dove after Valkyrie, then 5, then 4 as the damaged emerald mount failed to keep formation. Streams of fire tore past her wings. Sparrow forced himself not to flinch. Every instinct wanted altitude, distance, safety. But safety would get them surrounded. So he aimed for the city. Valkyrie folded her damaged right wing halfway and rolled between 2 factory towers, so close Sparrow saw workers through the glass staring upward with open mouths. A blast of ruby fire struck the tower behind them, melting decorative stone into molten streaks. The aristocrats were firing into their own city. Sparrow recorded everything. Smile for the public record, he muttered. He opened every emergency broadcast receiver he could reach and dumped the live feed into local civilian networks. Grainy footage spread through factory screens, worker comms, maintenance terminals, street displays. Across Athalgard's lower districts, thousands watched the High Rider Vanguard breathe fire over civilian airspace to kill 1 white dragon and 1 human mechanic.
Good.
Let them see. Valkyrie shot into the industrial canyon between the turbine stacks, her black wings scraping sparks from a rusted rail bridge. The royal dragons followed badly. They were powerful in open sky, magnificent in parade formation, terrifying above battlefields built for them. But down here, between exhaust towers and freight cables, their size became a liability. Sparrow knew machines. He knew tight spaces. And Valkyrie was learning faster than anything alive had the right to learn. Left vent array, he said. Valkyrie banked hard. A sapphire dragon followed, too confident, too wide. Its wing clipped the hot exhaust column. The creature shrieked and veered upward, rider fighting for control. 1 out, Sparrow said. A green dragon came from below, jaws glowing. Drop. Valkyrie collapsed her wings and fell like dead weight. The fire passed over them. She reopened the wings at the last possible second and snapped into a vertical climb directly beneath the attacker. Her reinforced shoulder slammed into its belly. The impact folded the beast upward with a crack Sparrow felt through his boots. 2. The crimson dragon roared above them. Alistair was no longer playing executioner. Now he was angry. Angry men made wider movements.
Sparrow could use that.
He turned Valkyrie toward the old transit spine that crossed the industrial district, a kilometer-long skeleton of steel beams and abandoned maglev track. Too narrow for noble dragons. Wide enough for a desperate machine with a pilot who had no respect for property value. Threaded. Valkyrie entered the structure at 400 knots. The world became steel lines. Sparrow's visor filled with proximity alerts. Red, red, red. Every beam came too fast. Valkyrie folded, tilted, snapped, corrected. Her mechanical wings moved with impossible violence, opening and closing through gaps that natural wings could never survive. Behind them, 1 vanguard rider tried to follow. He lasted 9 seconds. His dragon clipped a support beam, spun out, and crashed through an upper freight platform in a shower of sparks and broken glass. 3. They burst out the far end of the transit spine into open air above the central district. And there was Alistair, waiting. The crimson dragon hovered between them and the sun, enormous wings spread, throat glowing like a star about to be born. He had predicted the exit. For once, Sparrow had nowhere clever to go. Valkyrie's right actuator flashed red. Hydraulic pressure dropping. Wing membrane torn. Spinal heat rising. She was fast but wounded. And Alistair knew it. You built a useful monster, the Duke said over the channel. But you are still only human. Sparrow looked past him. At the palace behind. At the council towers. At the broadcast drones now swarming the sky, feeding every second to the world below. Then he looked at the targeting grid. He had no cannons, no missiles, no weapons, but he had mass, velocity, a damaged wing full of heat, and Newton, who had always been humanity's most reliable war criminal. Sparrow leaned low against Valkyrie's neck. "He thinks we're trapped," he said. Valkyrie's growl vibrated through the chassis. "Yeah," Sparrow whispered. "That's his mistake." Alistair gave the final order. The Crimson Dragon inhaled. Valkyrie charged straight at him. Not away.
Not down.
Straight. The Vanguard channel exploded with disbelief. Alistair's plasma blast fired early, too wide, too arrogant. Valkyrie rolled through the edge of it, losing another strip of graphene membrane to the flame. Sparrow's vision blurred under the heat spike. "Now," he shouted. Valkyrie folded her left wing, locked the damaged right into a cutting angle, and spun. Her glowing titanium leading edge struck the Crimson Dragon's exposed throat like a guillotine made of sunrise. The plasma inside the beast destabilized. For one silent instant, Duke Alistair understood exactly what human engineering had done. Then the Crimson Dragon's own fire erupted backward. The explosion swallowed him. The shockwave hurled Valkyrie across the sky. Sparrow blacked out for half a breath and woke to alarms, smoke, and falling debris. Valkyrie was still airborne, barely. Her right wing screamed with every correction. Below them, the flaming wreckage of the Crimson Dragon crashed through the glass roof of the High Council Assembly Hall. The Vanguard stopped. Every rider, every dragon, every arrogant creature that had believed bloodline was destiny. They stared at the scorched white dragon with black burning wings hovering above their capital. Valkyrie roared. The sound rolled across a Thalgard like a verdict, and one by one, the perfect dragons turned away. Victory did not feel clean. It smelled like burning graphene, scorched scales, leaking hydraulic fluid, and hot metal cooling too fast. Valkyrie stayed airborne for 12 more seconds after the Vanguard broke. That was all she had left. Her right wing trembled violently with every downstroke. The membrane had torn along the outer third, flapping in the wind like a wounded flag. Hydraulic pressure dropped in ugly red numbers across Sparrow's visor. The spinal chassis was intact, but several mounting brackets had warped under thermal stress. Her body wanted to land. Her pride did not. "Easy," Sparrow said, voice low. "You made your point," Valkyrie growled. It sounded weak. That scared him more than the battle had. "Don't argue with me while your wing is trying to become scrap." Below them, a Thalgard was no longer quiet. The city had seen everything. Factory workers stood on rooftops, in transit yards, on maintenance platforms, their faces turned upward toward the impossible creature bleeding smoke above them. In the upper districts, noble banners burned where falling plasma had struck towers. In the lower districts, every public display still carried Sparrow's live feed, the Vanguard firing into civilian airspace, Alistair admitting sabotage, the perfect Crimson Dragon dying to the creature they had called defective. Truth had entered the bloodstream of the planet. Now it needed a heart to pump it. Sparrow guided Valkyrie toward the central broadcast spire. It rose from the industrial district like a rusted needle, old, ugly, and powerful enough to hijack every emergency frequency on the continent. He had repaired its auxiliary relays 2 years earlier after a mining riot damaged the lower transmitters. The council had never paid him for that job. That felt appropriate. Valkyrie landed hard on the upper platform. Too hard. Her right foreleg buckled. Sparrow nearly slammed into the saddle frame as her wings collapsed around her in a hiss of overheated servos. He unlatched himself before the harness finished depressurizing and slid down her side, boots hitting metal with a sharp clang. "Stay with me," he said, moving to the damaged wing. The leading edge was half melted. The graphene membrane had curled and split. Fluid leaked from a cracked actuator in dark, shining drops. Valkyrie turned her head toward him, breathing heavily. Her pale eyes were still bright, still angry, still alive. "Good," Sparrow whispered. "Be mad later. I need you loud first." He pulled the data core from his flight rig. Inside it was everything. The original scans. The bone degradation maps. The thallium signature. The hatchery chemical logs he had stolen from Artha's private channel during the fight. Alistair's open-channel confession. Visual proof of the Vanguard attacking civilian zones. Not rumor. Not rebellion talk. Evidence. The kind aristocrats feared more than claws. Sparrow limped to the broadcast terminal and slammed the data core into the emergency access port.
The old system resisted.
Of course it did. Every machine on a Thalgard had been built to obey owners before users. Sparrow pulled the side panel off, ripped out the authorization relay, and hotwired the input manually. "Come on," he snarled. "I fixed you once. Don't get proud now." The screen flickered. Then every display on the planet went black. For one breath, a Thalgard held still. Then Sparrow's face appeared everywhere. On palace walls. On factory screens. On mining helmets. On school projectors. On private noble dining halls where silver plates still sat beside untouched meals. He looked terrible. Burned flight suit. Blood on his cheek. Smoke behind him. A white dragon with broken mechanical wings breathing like a storm at his back.
Good.
Let them see the cost. "My name is Sparrow Abernathy," he said. "Human contractor. Mechanic. The man your council tried to execute today." His voice carried across the planet. "They told you Valkyrie was defective. They told you royal blood was pure. They told you the weak were born weak, the low were born low, and the sky belonged to anyone lucky enough to hatch perfect." He uploaded the first file. The scan filled every screen. "This is her bone chemistry." The second file. "This is the poison." The third. "This is the hatchery log proving it was injected before birth." A murmur rose from the city below. Not heard through his helmet.
Felt.
Like pressure changing before a storm. "They are not protecting bloodlines," Sparrow said. "They are manufacturing weakness. They cripple the dragons they can't control. They poison the eggs that threaten their monopoly. Then they call the survivors defects and throw them away." More files flashed. Names.
Dates.
Clutch numbers. Disposal orders. Payments. Artha's signature. Alistair's seal. Council authorization. Across a Thalgard. The lie split open. Sparrow stepped back from the terminal and looked into the nearest broadcast drone. "You thought this was about one dragon." He shook his head. It was never about one dragon. Behind him, Valkyrie forced herself upright. The movement was painful. Sparrow heard the grinding actuator. Saw the torn wing drag.
Knew she should not be standing.
She stood anyway. Slowly, she opened what remained of her wings. One black span fully extended. One damaged, burned, shaking, but still raised. Her roar tore through the broadcast system. Not polished. Not beautiful. Not noble.
Free.
The lower city answered first. One shout. Then hundreds. Then thousands. Miners ripped council crests from refinery walls. Mechanics opened locked maintenance gates. Hatchery workers turned on their overseers. City guards watched the footage of Alistair admitting the truth and lowered their weapons rather than defend a dead lie. In the upper district, noble families sealed their doors. It did not help. A system built on obedience had forgotten what happened when the people maintaining the doors stopped obeying. Within hours, the High Rider Council chamber was surrounded. Within one day, Artha was dragged from a private evacuation shuttle by workers who knew exactly what a disposal order looked like because some of them had signed them with shaking hands. Within 2 days, the royal hatcheries opened. Sparrow returned to Hangar 42 on the third morning. Not as a conqueror. Not as a ruler. As a mechanic with a half-melted dragon and more repair work than any sane man would accept. Valkyrie limped beside him, wings folded unevenly, head high.
Broken again.
But not discarded. Never again. The revolution did not end with cheering. Cheering was easy. Rebuilding was harder. By the end of the first week, the High Rider Council no longer existed except as burned banners, confiscated accounts, and frightened men waiting behind tribunal glass. The noble estates were locked down. The Vanguard stables were emptied. The hatchery gates stood open for the first time in generations. Inside them, the truth looked worse than the data. Rows of pale hatchlings. Twisted wings. Weak bones. Scarred shells marked for disposal before life had even properly begun. Some dragons had been poisoned. Others starved. Others selectively damaged, then recorded as natural failures so the council could keep perfection rare and power expensive. Sparrow walked through the hatcheries once. Only once. After that, he went back to Hangar 42 and worked, because rage could break a system, but only work could build the next one. The first dragon arrived in a cargo sling at sunset. A small gray juvenile, with one malformed wing and eyes too tired for something that young. The workers who brought him stood nervously at the hangar entrance, as if Sparrow had become something larger than a man overnight. He hated that. "Put him by Bay 3, he said. "And stop looking at me like I know what I'm doing." By morning, there were 5 more. By the next week, 20. By the end of the month, Hangar 42 had become less a repair shop and more a rebellion with toolboxes. Human engineers came first, then undercity mechanics, then former hatchery technicians who had once obeyed orders and now wanted the chance to undo at least one of them. They built braces, prosthetics, wing supports, spinal harnesses, oxygen rigs, smart fabric stabilizers, and training frames from whatever they could salvage. Not every dragon became Valkyrie. That mattered. Some were too fragile for combat wings. Some only needed braces to walk without pain. Some would never fly but could run, climb, carry, hunt, live. The old world had measured worth by sky dominance. Sparrow refused to build a new cage from different metal. Function first, he told every engineer. Dignity second. Glory only if the patient asks for it. Valkyrie became the proof. Not because she was perfect, because she was not. Her right wing never fully recovered from the battle. The leading edge stayed scarred, darker than the rest of the titanium, permanently warped where the Crimson Dragon's plasma had nearly melted through. Sparrow could have replaced it with cleaner parts. She refused. The first time he brought the replacement strut near her, Valkyrie folded the damaged wing tight and growled until 3 technicians left the room. Sparrow looked at the scorched metal, then at her. "You want to keep the scar?" She stared back.
He sighed.
"Of course you do." So the scar stayed. Within 6 months, the sky over Thalgard changed. At first, nobles called it chaos. They were not completely wrong. The first generation of rebuilt dragons flew badly, loudly, and without the elegant formation discipline of the old vanguard. Some had glider frames. Some had partial mechanical limbs. Some wore heat shields over damaged scales. Some flew with human pilots. Some flew alone, controlled by their own neural links, answering to no saddle and no bloodline. They filled the industrial skyline with noise. Beautiful noise. Children climbed refinery roofs to watch them pass. Miners painted white wing symbols on cargo doors. Former royal riders who had surrendered their crests either learned to work beside the creatures they once would have killed, or discovered the new world had no use for them. Sparrow took no seat on the Provisional Council. They offered. He refused before they finished the sentence. "I fix things," he said. "That doesn't qualify me to govern them." "You started this," one worker representative argued. "No," Sparrow said, looking toward Valkyrie sleeping beneath the gantry crane. "They started it. She survived it. I just made sure everyone saw." So he stayed in the hangar. The workbench returned to its natural state, half tools, half caffeine, entirely unsafe. Engines still came in broken. Thrusters still needed calibration. People still argued over invoices. The world had changed, but machines remained stubborn, which Sparrow found comforting. Valkyrie stayed too. She could have lived in the liberated royal eyrie. The workers built one for her, high above the city, with open wind and sun-warmed stone. She visited it sometimes. But every night, she returned to She folded her black wings beside the generator banks, rested her massive head near Sparrow's toolbox, and watched him work with pale eyes that no longer looked tired. One evening, months after the uprising, Sparrow stood outside the open hangar doors as the twin suns sank behind the industrial towers. Above him, dozens of rebuilt dragons cut across the orange sky, some graceful, some awkward, all alive. Valkyrie stepped beside him. Her damaged wing clicked softly as it folded. Sparrow looked at the scarred metal, the white scales, the creature the world had called defective until she shattered its definition of strength. They wanted you to be proof that broken things should be thrown away, he said. Valkyrie lowered her head until her snout nearly touched his shoulder. Sparrow smiled faintly. Bad engineering. Above them, the sky filled with impossible wings. Metal and bone. Scar and sunlight. Every one of them, a refusal. The aristocrats had built a world where only perfect things were allowed to rise. A human mechanic and a shattered dragon had answered with something better. Not perfection. Adaptation. And once a Thalgard learned that broken things could fly, no one on that world ever looked at the ground the same way again.